Well, hello and welcome. My name is Morgan Eyre. I am a journalist with several years' experience. I've written a lot about health-related topics in the past through my time at the BBC, where I covered the COVID-19 pandemic. I've reported on genetic health conditions for Euronews, and also reported on tech and where tech and crime converge. Nice. Today, we are talking about plant-based cancer drugs and the fight against cancer, and no better person to do that, Guilhem Maffre-Baugé, CEO and co-founder of PhairiLab. Welcome.
Thank you.
And now you have, your company is here at a very interesting time. You know, cancer is still one of the leading causes of death worldwide. And in fact, there was a Lancet report last year that said that, in fact, the amount of deaths is going to increase by about 75% by 2050 to around 18 million. The number of cases as well are expected to rise. So it's a very important moment for global health. But not only is it an important moment for global health, there's also a big interest in what your company is doing in plant-based medicines. I read some market research recently published at the start of this month, which said that around $38 billion global market share of plant-based medicines. That's expected to go up to around $58 billion in 2030. So obviously there's a lot of these different types of market research reports around with various different numbers on them, but the trend is clear. They're all going in an upward trajectory, which brings us to your company and to PhairiLab. So can you just describe your professional journey and your entrepreneurial experience? What led you to co-found a biotech company, centered on nature-powered oncology?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me here. I spent more than 20 years in the pharma industry, and I had the chance to, first of all, to have various roles in this industry, from finance, marketing, sales, and for most of it, general management. And I was very, very lucky to work on really groundbreaking medicines, really breakthrough medicines that truly changed the game, that changed the lives of patients, the way healthcare is delivered. At the same time, I realized that safety is paramount, and that these conventional drugs I've worked on and that we use in modern medicine, these conventional drugs, they have what we call a narrow therapeutic window. So you cannot play around too much how much you can give to a patient, because yes, you want to be efficacious, but you also have to be safe. And this is why I got really interested in what are the alternatives. What else can we do to deal with this issue?
And obviously PhairiLab operates at the intersection of science, nature, and clinical translation. What was the original insight that convinced you that this approach could become a scalable biotech platform?
Good question. Well, before scalability, I think it's important to realize the potential, right, of such drugs. The drugs we're working on, what is fascinating is this ability to multi-target, hit several targets at the same time. So this is remarkable, and do this while being safe. And we know that from the ethnobotanical knowledge, right? So this is really important. Now you talk about scalability. The great thing is that these drugs coming from those plants, we know also again from the ethnobotanical knowledge that they could be applied to different indications, to different diseases. They can be used in different diseases. So this is where I see the scalability, and indeed we need to have this kind of platform mentality. So we have really a treasure, something that we have seen over the last centuries, We have these plants that can heal different diseases. Let's use them as platform. And today we have the tools. So for decades we did not have the tools to truly understand what they're doing, how they're doing it. But now with the multi-omics technologies with AI, we are able to understand how complex drugs, so that come from plants and keep the natural balance of the plant. This is where the complexity is. When you keep this natural balance and you don't just take one molecule out of it, so you keep the natural balance. So you have this complex drug, what it can do on a complex biological system. We have the tools today, and this is why it's fascinating to be in this adventure today.
And just what you were saying about you have the tools and technology, is that why you think, because you said that we've had these plants for centuries around, is that kind of why you think other companies or haven't done this yet, or why it's, I guess, taking off now? Is it because of that?
That's a great question. So probably the way I described it, it might sound a bit like why don't we do it, and why isn't everyone working on exactly the same thing? Well, there are several things. So the use of plants obviously is not new. So it has always been there. Now, for a long time, or up to now even, I would say, you have a use that consists of taking one molecule of interest, so purifying the plant till you have this one molecule, and you use it in your drug, or like continuing in a, I would say, traditional herbal medicine way. What we can do now, indeed, is with those new technologies, multi-omics with AI, we can understand what these groups of molecules do together in synergy. This is hugely important, is what do they do in synergy? What happens when we take this molecule out? What happens when we use this molecule alone versus using it within the group of molecules? So this level of complexity, we have the tools now. So this is one reason. Another reason is, to do what we do, you need to have access to biodiversity. So we have access to the second most biodiverse country in the world, which is Colombia, second after Brazil. So this is something that you cannot build, in one day. And Professor Susanna Fiorentino, who is the one behind the research of everything we do with her team, spent the last 20 years studying the ethnobotanical knowledge, studying these plants with this new eye, with the new technology, but also, and this is hugely important, integrating the whole value chain. Because you cannot do what we do without integrating this value chain from the farmers down to having a drug.
And just that kind of leads us on to, as a CEO, how do you articulate your vision of what you're trying to achieve with investors, partners, and clinicians who may be more familiar with conventional oncology models?
No, that's true. That's what I have done for the biggest part of my career. If we try to see the alignment here, in my opinion, you always need to focus on the highest unmet needs. When you focus on the highest unmet needs, this is much more difficult to align everyone, right? And this is what we do. We really try to spot, so we are aware of what our drugs can do, but we also try to spot, so where is the intersection with truly hard to treat diseases, with the highest unmet needs. And this is in general in this part that everyone comes together, like patients, physicians, investors. That's kind of the safe place to be. But of course, it's a tremendous amount of work.
Well, actually, just you saying that kind of reminds me of during the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, it's a very different disease, but we saw that, you know, the vaccines went from the lab into people's arms at unbelievable speed. And yes, it was, you know, there was a lot of unknowns around COVID, but it's interesting that you do say that. You know, it is quite incredible when groups come together that they can bring these without taking any, you know, shortcuts on the science or the efficacy as well. It's very impressive. And, you know, biotech leadership does often involve navigating uncertainty and some skepticism as well. Could you share a moment when your conviction as a co-founder was tested and how you responded?
Well, I would say what is being tested, probably more than our conviction, is our resilience, right? In those days, you need to be extremely resilient when you drive a biotech company like that. In my opinion, the best thing you can do is deliver results. The results will speak. And we're very fortunate to have very good results, like with a very good phase 1 on one of our drugs, successful phase 2 on another drug. So we're very fortunate with that. Not so surprised, because what was being seen in the preclinical setting and the ethnobotanical knowledge, it gave, you know, all the hopes. And we hope that it continues, of course, like this, and we're working hard. But I would say, yes, resilience. Now, I come back to high unmet needs. When you know you are working on something that will change people's lives, that will bring more life and a better life also, because that's also our goal. So we don't want just to prolong life. We want to use these drugs because we know that they will improve. It's hugely important for oncology patients. So that's how I see it.
So would you call PhairiLab a game changer?
Yes, definitely. Because again, plants are not new. The use of plants is not new. It's just that in modern medicine, we had to stay for decades. We had to stay with a certain use of it, right? What we are bringing is this new look, thanks to new technologies. This new look, what you can do with plants, and again, it's about looking at what you can do with the synergy. With the synergy. So this synergy of molecules, what does it do? There is something also quite interesting. So in conventional drugs, usually you expose the body to a single compound, which means that you expose the body potentially with too much of one substance. The beauty with plants is that you can reach the same effect, but as a synergistic effect. And because it's in synergy, because you have several molecules in it, you avoid exposing the body to too much of something, to too much of a substance that could be toxic at certain levels. So it's hugely important.
So would that be about reducing side effects, I guess? Would that be one thing that would help with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
And we have obviously talked about, the patients and high unmet needs. How do you collaborate with clinical teams to ensure that scientific hypotheses align with real-world patient needs?
Yes. Yeah, never-ending questions here. So stay down to earth and focused on the outcome and on the results, obviously. Well, we always come from the patient, and I would say when I talk with Professor Susanna Fiorentino, she came, so with her original idea, she really came from the patient. It's by observing the way healthcare was delivered that she said, we can do better. She had this insight. We can do better. We have to do better. It's not enough to prolong life if people have a very poor life, are not happy with their treatment, with what's happening in their daily life. It's not satisfactory. And it's with this motivation that she started this. So it really starts from a need. It's not just doing plants for doing plants or following a trend. And we definitely not just follow a trend. I think we are definitely trailblazers in this approach we are proposing.
And biotech innovation, it involves long timelines. There's a lot of uncertainty. How do you collectively approach decision making under risk?
Risk. So always very relevant in biotech and I guess in entrepreneurship in general. Well, in our case, there are several ways to de-risk. I tend to think that starting from the ethnobotanical knowledge, it's a first very effective way to de-risk, because this was used for centuries by people. It's just they did not have today's knowledge to know where it's most efficacious, what dose use, what is this part of the plant doing, what is that part of the plant doing, how can we isolate groups of molecules depending on their impact. But we know it has been used, and from a safety point of view, you don't start from scratch. And it's thanks to our partner in Colombia, company called Dream Bio, that we have access to all this knowledge and that we can make sense of this, and also have this very integrated value chain that enable us to have access and to test and all this.
And speaking of testing, how do you evaluate success? What data, signals, or outcomes matter most at this stage?
I think success, again, it's back to results. It's back to results. Is continue to deliver results with our clinical studies. We want in the next 5 years to deliver at least one fast track drugs on a hard to treat disease in oncology. This is how we would measure success. We also are ambitious about the platform, what we talked about, the platform. And it goes back to your previous question, and the de-risking is we don't see ourselves like a company that has one early stage compound and maybe it will work, maybe 90% chance it will not work. We're not in that business. We have the platform mentality, right? So we want to build something that will deliver on a regular basis real solutions for high unmet needs. And these plants, we know they have multiple benefits in different diseases. And it's up to us to build what is needed in terms of platform, using the new technologies to make it a powerhouse. So that's also the ambition, to transform this biodiversity into a powerhouse of solutions for high unmet needs, high unmet medical needs.
And you talked about, fast tracking the process a little, and a little earlier as well. I mentioned, what we saw with COVID, for example. We saw things go very, very quickly because groups came together. Is there something that you feel that PhairiLab or the industry in general are there barriers or things that you would like to see changed or improved in order for you to get this process sped up, whether that's from a regulatory standpoint or even from a government policy perspective? Is there something that you feel like would make this process a lot easier for you to develop and to then translate it to patients?
No, thanks for the question. Indeed, everything we do needs to be done in a certain framework. And in our case, so we do clinical studies that the way they are done for conventional drugs, so rigorous evidence-based clinical evaluation. I don't like to complain about the framework because the framework is the framework.
It's there for safety, and
that's it. And really, I don't think we can complain because there is an FDA botanical drug regulatory pathway. It exists. Yeah. So it's up to us to convince people around us, to convince more investors about the opportunity, why it makes sense. So why it makes sense to use these drugs we're working on right now on aggressive cancers, because at some point it becomes a metabolic play. So it makes a lot of sense to use these complex drugs to address complex systems. So it's up to us to convince, and the framework is there. So you have the botanical drug pathway, and when you address high unmet need, you also have fast track pathways to accelerate the development and get the drug as fast as possible to the patients.
And so, what breakthroughs or research milestones at PhairiLab make you most optimistic about the future of this therapeutic platform?
Yes. Well, again, I go back to the results. What we're seeing in the clinical studies, believe me, it's really remarkable. This gives a lot of hope. When I look at the preclinical work, and I was not there at that time, and a tremendous amount of work has been done before I arrived. When I look at this, I also understand why the teams were so enthusiastic, and why they had no doubt. Yeah, we have to go for the clinical evaluations, because you see something that is really remarkable. So this is where I see the hope, and I do think also that our project makes a lot of sense in general. It makes a lot of sense in general because it deals also with biodiversity. Yeah, with biodiversity, and you can't do anything nowadays without thinking of what is your impact on the environment. Yeah, can you do business, generate value, and at the same time do something good for the planet? So it all comes together. Yeah.
And just on that note about sustainability, there are, you've said before, plants, they've been used in medicines for centuries, and even some of the current cancer drugs we have, vincristine and the Taxol as well, they required a lot of plant for basically what you were getting for a drug. So how are you managing the sustainability then as a company and ensuring that you're not putting the biodiversity at risk and all these other things with deforestation and whatnot that we're going through?
No, that's an amazing question. Several aspects. So first of all, luckily not everyone has access to the biodiversity. So again, it was really work Susanna and her team. It took years and years to put all this in place and have the trust also to get access to biodiversity. And this is why today we have a huge asset. So the whole thing is a huge asset that we have, and that enable us to start building a platform. So not everyone can do that, and it's regulated. This is what is really important to keep, is that it needs to stay regulated so that there is enough renewal of the source. And second, I would say in itself also to say we need biodiversity. Let's dream for a bit. Yeah, let's imagine we manage to pull this movement, this big movement, and there are many companies that start to get more and more interested yeah, in this this new way of seeing plants, using plants, um, highlighting the value of biodiversity, people will then be motivated to keep biodiversity alive. Already this in itself is huge. Yeah. Because I believe in these topics, so if you say to people, you need to take care of biodiversity for your great-great-grandchildren to live better, it's not as tangible than to say, this thing is helping you today. So as a farmer, this thing is helping you today. It has value. You can almost put a number on it. Yeah. This is a bit down to earth, but I think we need to be down to earth, yeah, and integrate things if we want people to be truly engaged and help, yeah, in continue to enhance, yeah, this biodiversity, respect it, and see it for the value it really has.
Yeah. And then looking ahead, what does success look like for PhairiLab, both as a company, but also for what you are doing for innovation in fighting cancer?
Success. So we talked about where we see ourselves in 5 years. So success is obviously at the end of the day delivering drugs to the patients, drugs that work. And this is the best thing, when you work in this field, is to see that it works, to hear doctors saying to you what they've seen, to hear that patients felt better. This is success in what we do. We hope we will have initiated or strongly contributed to initiate a new movement, a new way of looking at botanical drugs. That's what we hope for, and also that this system that we have built, this virtuous, sustainable, circular economy system that Professor Fiorentino and her team had managed to put in place, that this appears and that it's getting known, better and better, more and more, as a best practice case. So that would be amazing.
And I don't think we've actually touched on what the kind of specific, obviously there's many different types of cancers, but what is it that you're specifically looking at PhairiLabs?
Yeah.
What are you working on?
Yeah, so at the moment we're looking at a number of digestive cancers, or cancers in the digestive system, and one also in a subset of breast cancer. This is where we are right now. We know there is even more potential. We've seen that. Now it's important to focus and to go by priority and see where is the highest unmet need and cater for that.
And you've also, you've talked about scalability as well before. The World Health Organization has mentioned that they did a report last year that looked at cancer research from 1999 up to 2022. And they said one of the biggest problems was that lower and middle income countries were not maybe getting the same amount of research or the same access to drugs and stuff that here, in Europe or the United States. Is that what you're developing? Would that be a more cost-effective solution than conventional drugs, or is it more scalable, or how would that work?
No, that's obviously what we hope also. In our opinion, that there's no true innovation if you don't at the same time make things more affordable or more accessible for more people. And thanks to new technologies, thanks to the head start that the ethnobotanical knowledge give to us, we do hope we will be able to make an impact also there and make things more affordable, and probably let's continue to dream a little bit, but motivate people who live in regions that have also great biodiversity to do similar things to what we're doing. I think that new technologies are also here to give access to lower middle income countries to new solutions.
And then just, I suppose, as well, you've talked about, you know, what success looks like in the next 5 years, but what is immediately next? What are you currently, you said there was like phase 1 and phase 2 for some of them. What's next in the pipeline?
No, that's, you know, when you have the platform mentality and when you realize the huge potential behind what we are doing, it's a bit of spinning plates. Yeah. So even if you're focused, you need to address multiple things at the same time. Obviously, going through clinical development is priority number 1. We need to continue this clinical development based on these great results. We have these very promising results. So that would be priority number 1. Then we need to, you know, get going also with the more long-term objective of going further in the use of AI, of these the combination of AI and these omics technologies to push the discovery. And then I would say at some point you have also to work on helping with agricultural development, making, you know, the environment with which you work even more favorable and even more able to respond to scale.
It actually sounds as well like you've got quite a team as well behind you, because obviously you've got scientists and you've got people, I'm sure, that are kind of, you mentioned Susanna, she was really working to secure, I guess, forest space or the biodiversity, and working with a whole lot of people on a great team by the sounds of it.
Yes, absolutely. And really kudos to Susanna, so to Professor Fiorentino, her team at the University of Javeriana in Colombia, to Dream Bio, our partner company there, for all this work that has been done. This is really huge, and you need a lot of faith, and you need to have seen the potential, this huge potential, to drive this. If you think of it, the inception of the project is like more than 20 years ago. So
long time
so
in making.
It's a long time. And but this is what it takes in biotech in general to get to a drug that has potential. But in what we do on top of it, you know, securing all this value chain, ensuring that you know, that there is no hole, you know, anywhere in the process, to make sure that you will deliver on your promises. So.
Well, thank you very much, Guilhem Maffre-Baugé. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure.